Welcome to our In Focus discussion tonight on growth in Utah. Our population is climbing, our traffic is increasing, and our housing market is extremely competitive. This ultimately leads to decisions to building more infrastructure, more housing, and more businesses. Tonight, we'll discuss generally about growth from a personal perspective. What do people want, and what do we expect our state and city leaders to do about it? Joining us now live in studio are Utah State Senator Jake Anderegg from Lehigh and Ari Bruning, the CEO of Envision Utah. Thank you both for joining us tonight to talk about this subject, and welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us to talk about this important issue.
Ari, let's start with you. Can you talk about the growth that we've seen over the past decade in the state? What are some positives and negatives due to growth?
Well, growth is a good problem to have. It means that we have a high quality of life and a strong economy, and that means our kids want to stay. And by the way, the majority of our growth is our own kids. And it also means that other people want to come join us here because it's such a great place. So I'd rather have that problem than some other places' problems. But it does bring challenges. We need to house our population. Housing affordability is an issue. We have air quality challenges, traffic challenges, outdoor recreation. If you try to get a campground, for example, it's very difficult to do. So lots of challenges come along with it, but it's a sign of prosperity and high quality of life.
The secret gems in Utah is definitely out there. We're no longer like a hidden secret, that's for sure. Senator Anderegg, on a personal level, how do you balance growth with quality of life?
Well, that's a double-edged sword because obviously, you know, our state constitution has us protect people's use of their property, and if a farmer decides he no longer wants to ranch and sell his property off, there is absolutely nothing government can do to stop them from utilizing their own land, their own property. And so when people they find the hidden gem of Utah. Utah's no longer a flyover state. People have the right to develop their land, sell it off, and so it puts us in this conundrum of how do we balance the growth that's coming, especially from California, with the impacts that has on infrastructure and schools and our water and everything that goes into it. So it's a constant battle, and I think that we can do it better and smarter, and I actually appreciate our friends from Envision Utah because they've helped us to develop the plans that help us make sure that we're developing and growing in a sustainable way.
So, Senator, let's talk a little bit about infrastructure. House Bill 433, which passed, had a lot of money for infrastructure projects, but we didn't do a second bond for future growth, even though the interest rates are extremely low. Where are we with money to see projects through for the upcoming decade and beyond?
Yeah, that's true. Part of the reason for that, though, was because we had an influx of one-time money that we can't count on after this year, but it came because of quite literally the recovery stimulus package that Congress passed, both the first and the second last year. So we found ourselves with over $1 billion of one-time money. And so many of us felt like it was important to not run up our limit on our credit card, if you will, to use that analogy. So yeah, we didn't bond as much as we otherwise would have, not because it isn't a practical or good idea to do with the low interest rates, but because, quite frankly, when you have this much one-time money, let's utilize that and save our spending amounts, our spending limit, if you will, for the future. Because usually what happens is when you have a downturn in the economy that inevitably is going to happen, when you have the ability to bond at those times, you're able to keep your economy going, and it has a greater macroeconomic effect upon stabilizing the economy. So,
now, Ari, these infrastructure plans are expensive. How are we set up for future growth?
Well, the good news is the same growth that creates the need for the infrastructure also brings new revenue to help pay for that infrastructure. And you know, the legislature just approved $1 billion for infrastructure, and not just for roads either. For the first time, the legislature actually funded public transportation as well as trails and bike lanes. And as we've worked with the public, we've seen a lot of desire for choices in how to get around, so that you know, if you want to drive, you can drive, but you also have other ways to get around. And it's also important to recognize that it's not just about spending money on infrastructure. The way we develop affects how much infrastructure we need. So if we're putting jobs and houses close together or houses close to shopping, people don't have to drive as much and we don't have to build as much roadway to get people around.
Senator Anderegg, what improvements would you like to see made in the legislative processes?
Improvements in the legislative process? Well, that's a loaded question. I think that we had an interesting aspect this year with COVID, and the Capitol was closed for a portion of the session to visitors. I think whatever we can do to incorporate as many voices in that process as possible helps the process to really be balanced. So I think we're doing a decent job, but we could always do a better job at making sure that the public is informed and is able to provide the input that they need, because ultimately these are taxpayer dollars that we're spending. So.
All right, Ari and Senator Anderegg, hold that thought. We have to take a quick commercial break, but when we return, we'll resume our In Focus discussion on growth in Utah. Thanks for staying with us for our second In Focus discussion tonight on growth in Utah. Before the break, we were joined by Utah State Senator Jake Anderegg from Lehi and Ari Bruning, the CEO of Envision Utah, for a live panel discussion. We pick up now right where we left off. Ari, when we talk about growth, housing is a huge deal. Right now there are fewer homes for sale and interest rates on loans are very low. Envision Utah has been looking at long-term growth for a while. How do you approach short-term growth?
Yeah, anyone who's looked to buy a home recently has seen the astronomical increases in prices. And I think you have some short-term issues related to COVID going on, but you also have a couple things. One is just that construction costs have increased significantly, the price of lumber and labor and so on. And then we have a shortage of housing. Our housing hasn't kept up with our growth. And so we just need to build more housing, units of all kinds, especially the kinds that are going to be more affordable. So talking about townhomes or apartments or smaller homes on small lots, those kinds of things. We need more. We need to build more to keep up with that growth.
I am one of the individuals that tried to buy a house this past year, and it's just so competitive. So I am agreeing with everything that you're saying about that. Senator Anderegg, can you also talk about the short term? Are city, county, and state officials overwhelmed by permitting and zoning issues right now, and how do you alleviate these issues?
Well, I think at the local level, yes, there's a tremendous amount of impact happening within the cities and the counties that is really hard to absorb. But you know, most of them have long-range growth master plans, so they've already kind of done steps to help them mitigate a lot of those expenses or a lot of the challenges that come from that. But I would say, you know, by and large, I don't know that there's going to be an easy fix for that. You know, I am the chair of the Utah Affordable Housing Commission, and right now we're dealing with a gap, if you will, of demand versus supply of nearly 40,000 units. That means 40,000 units people, families are looking for homes, and there aren't enough homes for it. So it is a serious problem, and it's only increasing. The last estimate I heard is that in 2020 we received almost 200,000 move-ins from California alone. That's probably not a scientific number, but that was the estimate I heard last November, and it's causing a lot of problems because a lot of these people are coming up here with cash and are buying homes above what they would even appraise for. So
Senator, let's follow up on that. So part of the issue in housing is low-income housing. Developers want to get as much as they can out of the properties they build or refurbish. So what can Utah's legislature do about that?
Well, we have a myriad of tools that we use to help for the development of affordable housing. We have the low-income tax credit, both the federal and the state low-income tax credits that help offset a developer's costs with deed restrictions so that those values are passed on to the low-income residents. We also have the Olene Walker Fund that helps provide gap funding. We have RDA money that is collected through property taxes at the local level. All of this goes into play to help reduce the overall cost to the developer. Those deed restrictions are put in place so that the ultimate end tenant are able to benefit from the lower rent payments on those. And so what we're really trying to do is we're trying to take a typical development cost of about 70% loan to value and get that down to about 55 to 50% loan to value and pass those savings on to the end person. So we have several tools that are working really well right now. We passed Senate Bill 164 this year, the Affordable Housing Bill, which is also a plan to help set up to provide maybe donate land for some of these projects when they fit the criteria to help bring more of these units online. And I would just say, I know I'm speaking a lot, but I'll just say one last thing. We passed a $50 million infusion of capital into the affordable housing gap measures, and our philanthropic community put $740 million of matching money into the Preservation Fund and the Olene Walker Fund to help bring this online. We believe that that's going to impact 20 to 25% of that gap within the next 3 years.
There's a lot going on there. That's good to know. Ari, let's get you to chime in on this. What do you feel is necessary for lower income housing in terms of planning, and how does the legislature fit in that piece of the puzzle in your mind?
Yeah, well, when you talk about lower income housing, you need to think about, first of all, the senator was talking a lot about this subsidized housing, where we're helping people afford housing who couldn't otherwise. And the market just can't produce housing for people of a certain income. So there's definite place for that, and we need that for sure. But then there's also just the overall cost of housing, and are we offering the kinds of housing that's more affordable, so that those who might not fall into that really low income category can find something to afford. And as I said before, we just need more of that housing, but especially we need that housing in places close to jobs, or close to shopping, or close to transportation, especially public transportation, because then that mitigates the impacts of the growth for all of us. People can get to things closer to home, there's less traffic, fewer air quality impacts, and people can get around more affordably. They may not even need to own a car.
Ari, follow-up question for you then, and this is kind of a broad question, but what do Utahns want when it comes to housing?
Yeah, so I guess in one word it would be variety, and a second word might be choice. So they're looking for variety of housing that matches what people want and can afford within a neighborhood, maybe being able to downsize or upsize and not have to leave your neighborhood. A variety of different neighborhood types. We see, some people want a traditional suburb, others want a more walkable kind of place, maybe even like a downtown Salt Lake. And we need to offer all of that in order to provide what people want, in order to manage our growth in a way that keeps life livable and great for everybody.
All right, Ari and Senator Anderegg, hold that thought. We have to take another quick commercial break, but when we return, we'll resume our In Focus discussion on growth in Utah. Welcome to our third and final In Focus discussion tonight on growth in Utah. Before the break, we were joined by Utah State Senator Jake Anderegg from Lehi and Ari Bruning, the CEO of Envision Utah, for a live panel discussion. We pick up now right where we left off. All right, the rest of these questions are for the both of you. We'll hear from Senator Anderegg first and then from Ari. So we'll have a lightning round of questions about growth projects. First off, what are your thoughts about the inland port, Senator?
I think the inland port is a tremendous opportunity for the state if done right. I do believe that there are ways to balance the environmental concerns with, honestly, the crossroads of the West scenario that we could see. I mean, Utah is uniquely positioned to be able to provide infrastructure and logistical support and dispersion, if you will, of freight to 2/3 of the entire United States. It has a tremendous opportunity for the state. It could be a huge boon for our economy and for jobs. I mean, the last estimate I heard is over 40,000 jobs down in that location and throughout the state when this comes online.
So freight growth in Utah is a foregone conclusion. Just to support our economy, especially our growing economy, as long as we're buying things and as long as businesses need to get goods in and out, freight and logistics is going to grow, and really it's only a question of how we're going to do it. And the technology and best practices exist already that we can accommodate our additional freight growth and still have great air quality and manage our traffic and so forth. But it's all about how we do it.
I'd like to turn now to the Utah State Prison, both the new facility and the redevelopment of the land in Draper. What are your thoughts about this?
Well, there's no doubt that 700 acres in a heavily populated county along the Wasatch Front that is basically virgin land is incredibly valuable. It will pay off huge dividends to the state in the long run, but we have to do it right. It's located right at the choke point of our state, there at the point of the mountain. 80% of our entire economy and GDP pass that point of the mountain every single day. So it is absolutely something that we need to do right, do it in the right way, and make sure that we can move goods, services, and people in and out of their jobs and in their homes, and mitigate the impacts upon the environment, and make it continue to be a great place to live and raise a family. So.
Yeah, it really is a tremendous opportunity there. Most places around the country would love to have that kind of opportunity right in the middle of our growing tech sector, between our two most populated counties. There's a huge opportunity to grow jobs, first of all, but then also to build the kind of place where we have a high quality of life, there's open space available, people can get to their jobs easily and so forth. And it's not just about that prison site, there's also a lot of land around it. Those gravel pits one day will no longer be gravel pits, they'll be something else. So we need to get it all right in order to have a great place.
Let's talk about NIMBY, which stands for Not in My Backyard, where people don't want changes to happen where they live. How do we overcome issues within the communities who are against certain developments?
Well, that's the $100 million question, right? Because, a lot of the local people, they see the growth, they see the problems we're having with the housing shortage, they see the problems with transportation, our schools, our water, and they go, okay, yeah, these are serious problems, but go take care of that over there, not here, not in my backyard. Let's do it over there. And so the problem we have is it's a difficult thing to balance between what the constituents in a particular city or subdivision might want versus the overall growth and the impact of that growth. So NIMBYism is a serious problem, and sometimes I have to tell you, when I've passed bills that are somewhat controversial because they force cities to do something that they ought to be doing, privately, behind the scenes, these city council members go, thank you, because we couldn't pull that off on our own. There's too much political heat. You did it, but I still have to speak against it, because if not, it's going to come back to bite me politically. So it's a hard balance to find, but we're doing our best.
Yeah, I have a lot of people tell me, I don't want Utah to become California. And I think often what they mean is I want to grow slower. But the last thing we want to do is to try to stop growth, because that is exactly how California got to where it is, by trying to slow growth, imposing regulations so that housing can't be approved and those kinds of things. And the result of that is everything we fear might happen because of growth comes to pass, because we didn't plan for it. And so when you have one community saying, I don't want the growth here, put it somewhere else, that's one community. But when it becomes all communities, then we have real issues, because then we aren't accommodating the housing we need. We haven't planned for it. We aren't growing in the right ways. And so what we need to do is have a community conversation about how we accommodate that growth. And I think a lot of those who oppose growth in their own communities, that's what they want. They want to be part of the conversation and understand where we're headed, and that there's a plan to accommodate this growth in a way that keeps us a great place to live.
We have about a minute left in the discussion. I'd like to get final thoughts from both of you. What are your hopes for the next 5 to 20 years and beyond?
Well, I would say first and foremost, we're not going to build roads enough to be able to accommodate this growth. We have to look at multimodal transportation options, expanding tracks, expanding front runner, expanding bicycle paths. And the whole work from home option is I think, a godsend. It's a huge boon for the state, and it's one of those positive aspects that have come from COVID. But it's not only transportation and infrastructure. We have to look at water. We have to look at what we do to actually get access to more water. We're landlocked, not because we don't have enough land, but because of access to good usable water. So my vision would be that we systematically and sustainingly put our efforts into infrastructure growth and stay, with the help of Envision Utah and a lot of the planning commissions throughout the state, stay 2, 3, 4 steps ahead of the growth so that we can maintain that balance. All
right, I am so sorry. We are out of time, but we had a great conversation. You've been hearing from Utah Senator Jake Anderegg from Lehigh and Ari Bruning, the CEO of Envision Utah. I'm sure this is not the last time we'll hear from either one of you. Thank you for joining us tonight to talk about this subject.
Thanks for having us.